Hey everybody, welcome to GraceStory Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Davison, and I am super excited about this podcast because it's our first one of many, and I'm excited about the content, but I'm also excited today about our first guest, the president and founder of GraceStory Ministries, and that's Amber Jones. Amber, how you doing?
Nate, I am so excited. We have been talking about creating more avenues to get resources into the hands of our GraceStory family. And today is just the launch of one of those. I'm just thrilled to be here.
Oh, yeah. And, some of the things that have been coming out on Facebook and Instagram, and we've been talking about this podcast, we were going to launch this in the summer. We're talking June or July. But with everything going on, we just thought, you know what? I'm quarantined. Why don't we go ahead and get started?
Absolutely.
But that's also why, you're on the phone. We wanted to do this live and in person, which we are live, but you're on the phone and you're in Michigan and I'm over here in Indiana. But God is good and he's helping us work through this. So today on this podcast, we've had a lot of people asking in the GraceStory community, is it just for women or are men allowed to be involved as well? Or, how did it get started? What is it all about? So we want to answer some of those questions on this podcast. And so why don't we just start there with Amber, how did all of this get started? What is the beginnings of GraceStory?
Yeah, so the beginnings of GraceStory, such an exciting story. And some of that we're going to revisit in the next podcast where I share a little bit more about my own story and journey of processing, because some of it is intertwined. But as far as the organization itself, about, 5-6 years ago, my dad and I were sharing our story of family healing. And as we would go into men's retreats and churches and share just what God was doing in our family, we would see such a response of people saying, wow, me too. I didn't realize more people were dealing with this. Unfortunately, we didn't have a great way to do follow-up. And so I took a step back and about 3.5 years ago, started doing some really deep work of my own. And I'll share a little bit more of that in a future podcast. But when I got to the end of those 3.5 years, I realized, okay, so do I write a book? How do I really impact the world with my story and the hope that you've given me? And I knew it had to have some element of follow-up with it. So that's really where one day I was sitting out, and we live on a beef farm in central Michigan, and beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon, just sitting there. And I felt like God just poured out this format for a GraceStory conference and organization to me that just has grown and grown. It's just been incredible.
So what was that like being there? I mean, you and I have talked offline about this, about getting the vision for GraceStory and what it is, not just, this concept of, hey, I want to share my story and then I want to help other people, but the actual format of, kind of this conference. And then what's coming later is down through the year support that people can have for their journey. What was that like, getting that concept?
Yeah. So right at first, it was pretty much just the women's conference that came to mind. And also knowing that this was going to be targeted eventually for the whole family. But I didn't know in that first initial setting how that would look. But that conference pouring out that we needed storytellers like I had already been doing with my story, sharing that and giving people relatability and hope, and yet also needing to follow those stories up with master's level instructors like we do at conference now, where we take those tools and some of those hard to understand words like boundaries and self-cares, and they kind of seem ambiguous at times. What does that really look like? And we break that down into what we can really use in our life.
Yeah, and talking about usability, I think is really big because, throughout the years, even in just let's talk about marriage. 5 years married this year, and I can't tell you how many times somebody's come up to me and said, "Hey, you need to read this book. It'll really help your marriage." And I'm like, I don't even have time to read the books I want to read, let alone the next one. So usability, small chunks, something you can look at, the time we have scrolling through Instagram or Facebook. Next thing you know, you're getting something you can really sink your teeth into, and like, wow, that was powerful. And I think I can implement that. So I know we've
Right.
talked about those things, being able to use those things, and that's part of where this podcast is coming from as well. What about
Yeah.
the actual name of Grace Story? Because I know you talked about that name just popping up, coming to you. Can you tell us what that was like? When you thought of that.
Yeah. So everybody knows you got to have a cool name, right? Like the name is everything. Everybody's going to be saying it. It's going to be hashtagged. Like this is you got to have a cool name.
It's going to be on all the T-shirts and hoodies. Absolutely.
Right. Exactly. So as I was like a few days past getting that format given to me, I was still without a name and I was a little concerned that it wasn't going to be cool. Had been praying about it, thinking up names that were not cool. And as I sat
Not
one
to
day
put
with
you on the spot,
devotion,
but can you remember any of those names? Because
I was afraid you were going to ask that.
I
No, I
absolutely want to know.
refuse.
Ah, okay.
I will have to look in my journals, and if I can ever find some of those names, I'll have to let you know.
That'd be fantastic.
That would be something fun to put in the show notes. So as I was reading devotions one day, though, First Peter 5:10, and I think you have that up there, Nate. If you want to read that, First Peter 5:10 came to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So 1 Peter 5:10, this is coming from the New Living Translation. In his kindness, God called you to share in his eternal glory by means of Christ Jesus. So after you have suffered a little while, he will restore, support, and strengthen you, and he will place you on a firm foundation.
Yeah, and there's another version that talks about God himself will restore you. And it just felt like there was this just kind of that aha moment where story is trending. We all know that story is important for marketing, and we hear all these things about story these days. But when it really boils down to it, what is the story that matters? And that's what we're doing with our life right now. How are we living out this journey? And I realized that so often, and again, this comes out of my own pain and journey. But there were times when God's grace was showing up for me when I thought I had been abandoned and had been left to do it alone, and that God knew everybody in the world, but not me individually.
Sure.
And that's God's grace showing up in our story. And it just was this, after you've suffered a little while, this is a season that God himself, who is walking with us and is always there, even when we don't see him for one reason or another, is there, and he himself comes in to restore us.
Absolutely. And, we brought up the scripture verse on purpose because it's actually a part of Grace Story, the mission of Grace Story, the mission statement, which is connect, equip, and restore. 1 Peter 5:10. I think it's important, though, for us to little caveat to that. We are not the ones doing the restoration. The Grace Story Ministry is not the one doing the restoration. We are helping to connect. We are helping to equip, and we are helping to restore. And of course, baked into the actual title, Grace Story, it's God's grace that's enabling all of us to be restored to what God originally intended for us.
Absolutely. I mean, connect. We want to do our best to connect you with the resources you need, the community you need. We want to do that through equipping you with those resources so that you can feel empowered when you go back to, a conference is such a high, and we're there for 2 days together, and the men's conference is coming up. It's actually in the works. So
I think we can probably answer that first question there, or one of the questions rather. Is this just for women? Apparently not. It's for everybody because men's conference is in the works. So there's an answer to that question there. So thinking back over the last year or so, what's one of the craziest things that's happened that kind of lets you know that God is a part of this?
Oh my goodness. So many things in that first year because it went so quickly. It was just truly one of those examples of holding on. And what I had thought, I'm a planner. And so as I had talked to a few people in December of 2018, like maybe this is something we could come together and think about. And then February 26, 2019 was our first board meeting.
Wow.
By June, we were an established nonprofit with the government, with the whole IRS exemption and all of that. It just moved along. November brought up the first women's conference with over 200 women in attendance.
That's amazing.
16 states represented, like I think nearly 20 different denominations. It was just incredible, this outpouring of readiness for what we were doing.
Yeah, and it's my understanding that was with very little marketing. That was a lot of word of mouth, or just, hey, God is moving.
Yeah, that was word of mouth. And then anything that I had done on Facebook, like with our social media page. And that grew, of course, also just so quickly as well.
Well, it does have to be Facebook official for it to actually have happened. So absolutely.
Right.
So with that, you're talking God is in that whenever it's just exploding with you having to do very little. What was one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome when it came to the ministry? Everything couldn't have been all, roses and happiness.
No. And, a couple of different things come to mind. I think one of it was honestly my own self-doubt. Once I started realizing how big this was going to be. I mean, I would talk to counselors and they would say, wow, Amber, this is incredible. This has not been done before. Even in the secular world, this isn't available, this combination of what you're doing with the follow-up. I mean, we partner with counselors for exclusive discounts on follow-up after the conferences and throughout the year. So just all the different details that went into making this happen. And there were times I would sit on my bed and just smash face cry and ask God, why me? I am not equipped. I am not qualified to do this. I'm not a business major. And it was incredible. He would respond because you're willing. And so it's not about the on paper qualifications that we always look to check off the boxes. There's a lot of ways I am qualified to lead this, but the bigger thing was he brought an incredible team, surrounded me with people that could fill in the gaps where I needed some help to make it happen. But he said, you're willing to do this.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about some of those people that they were there during that first year, that they had done things with startups. They had started up ministries. They had helped make events happen. And really, those people, there's too many to name. Some still involved in the ministry are just, amazing that they were there. And it's definitely a God thing that they were there to help lift you up and share that, because while you're the heart and soul and your story is the beginning of Grace Story, they really help to propel it to that next level. So besides those challenges, there's got to be some cool stories coming out of last year's conference or something behind the scenes. Can you share with us maybe one or two of those stories, some of those better things that have happened since the starting of Grace Story?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's one story in particular, and I have permission to share it, that comes to mind. A young adult lady that came to conference, and she just stolen my heart. She's just a sweetheart, but she comes from a family of just a history of trauma and some really big things there. And so as she was preparing to come to conference, she really wanted her mom to come with her. And she wasn't sure if her mom would be able to handle it. And so one of the things that we did was just band together and pray with her about that. And so as they got to conference, they came, they showed up. It was just really cool to see them there. And the mom said so the first night of conference, she said she had the first night in like maybe 15 years where she slept through the night.
Wow.
I mean, that alone, it sounds little, but when you live in a life racked with anxiety, and you're up multiple times a night, maybe afraid, and that is significant to get an 8 hours of rest. And then as she left from conference, though, so she had an incredible conference with us. She went home and she made she reported back at least 5 concrete steps that, I don't want to go into them specifically, but 5 concrete steps following conference within the next couple of weeks that put her on a path of healing. like she had never experienced before. And then since then, in the last couple of months here, I've heard again from the daughter that said, hey, because of Grace Story and what you guys have done and helped and influenced in my life, I'm actually going off to college this fall. And that was one of the things that was just a kind of a scary thing for her to do. And she said, I am going to study counseling to
Wow.
do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's one family.
And that's just one story.
One story.
So I want to talk a little bit more about conference after we give a short message from our sponsor, which is us, GraceStory Ministries. But so put a pin in that, and we'll talk more about what they can expect from GraceStory Ministries conference coming up in 2020. Okay?
Sounds good.
So GraceStory Ministries is sponsoring this podcast, and they are wanting you to know about the Grace Story community page on Facebook. Just started up. This is a place where you can expect to find safe conversation. So honest questions and dialogue, live teaching, videos by our master's level and field experts, and so much more. Ryan Waters has already shared on there. We're going to have LaShonda Suggs sharing about grounding. And then we're also going to have Sarah Fry. She's going to be back talking about some things to deal with your children during this time of seclusion and quarantine. The men and women who are part of our email subscriber family have access to this. So if you haven't already, run over to the website, GraceStoryMinistries.com, and subscribe. So Amber, I want to talk about the upcoming conference, Grace Story Conference 2020. This year it is still women. I know the men are excited and wanting their own conference, but this year still women. Can you give us a little breakdown of what they can expect this year, who's in the lineup, and where's it going to be, starting with just who are we going to hear about?
Yeah, so our storytellers this year, we have Jamie Taylor, who's from Idaho, and just an incredible speaker, worship leader out there. They're actually planting a new church, and her and her husband. You can follow her on Instagram, and she's an author of the book Finding Brave. She talks about her journey through as being a worship leader and church leader, debilitating anxiety that she struggled with as she would try to do some of those duties, lead as a mom and that sort of thing. Just really looking forward to connecting with Jamie at conference. Rachel Henry is the other storyteller that's going to be sharing with us, and her story is just so impactful on the power of forgiveness. And wow, just incredible. She has a ministry website, Broken to Brave, if you want to look up some more information about her. And she's also been on a few podcasts, including the Jamie Ivey podcast, which is a really great place to go and get some more inspiration if you'd like to, if you're looking for some podcasts to listen to. Our instructors this year, we have Kathy Sprinkle, who is a powerhouse instructor, a lot of fun, politically incorrect in all the best ways. Just love her. And she's going to be sharing with us. She's actually one of my first, now she won't tell you this because of confidentiality, but she was one of my first counselors when I went to Counseling Alliance there in Cincinnati to start doing my journey of processing. Just an incredible, gifted lady. And then let's see, Kathy Patton. Dr. Kathy Patton is a chiropractor here in Central Michigan. And she's going to be talking to us about how the nervous system interacts with mental health. And so just that we are integrated beings. We're not just emotional or spiritual. You can't just keep these little boxes separated. All of us are interconnected.
So when we talk about whole person healing, from a Christian worldview perspective, it's great to have that we are an entire person. So what we have spiritually, emotionally, physically, it does all interact. I know coming from a nursing background, talking about the holistic side of things, it integrates well with the Christian worldview because God made us a very unique, and it's who we are. So also when we're talking about Conference 2020, can you tell us, I hear we're moving to a new place. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so our venue this year is Springdale Nazarene Church, and I love this is going to create a little bit more of a relaxed space for us where we can have the coffee bar.
I had heard there was coffee. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So And it's right between where we're going to be hosting the self-care vendor market and where the auditorium will be. So you'll be able to get it coming and going. And the self-care vendor market. I mean, we didn't talk about that yet. So that is an incredible interactive. This is not just exhibitors. We've got massages and spa care and yes, essential oils. We're going to get you hooked up. But home-based business opportunities for sure because of financial freedom. But our counseling partners are there. And so you get to meet them firsthand and build that initial relationship that can make taking that next step towards counseling a little less scary. We've got art booths and, so many other just fun, interactive things. The new booth opportunities coming this year that I don't want to spoil by telling you what we've got, but there's some really cool stuff happening.
So the actual investment price for someone to come to the conference is $249. But I know that a lot of times, and I don't know when you'll be listening to this podcast, so I don't want to give out a special deal price on this show. But please go to GraceStoryMinistries.com and check out that page before you go out and purchase a ticket, because all the time there's deals going on intermittently as we head towards November, which is when the conference is, so that you can save some money.
Yeah, so the Cincinnati conference is always the second weekend of November. So no matter when you're listening to this podcast, you can look at your calendar and know what to expect. Second weekend of November, as long as something doesn't happen, that's the general time that we shoot for. And the standard ticket price $249 is for both days, 2 complete days of conference. All the storytellers, the instructors, the self-care vendor market, the free coffee that's included. And we're working on having food trucks there, so you'll have access to food really close by. You won't even have to leave. You can just really work on that right there. My goal with that price, so we've had it both ways. We had some people concerned, wow, why so much? Why not make it free or almost free so more people can come? And I'd like to speak to that just for a moment.
Sure. Go ahead.
So my goal from the very beginning has always been to keep the price for a 2-day conference as close as possible to the average of a 2-hour session of counseling, so that you can get an incredible jump start on your work for just about the same price as what you would a startup 2-hour session. And so far we've done that. The other reason is because this is tough work. This is not just another worship conference. Now, we're going to have a lot of fun, but the people leaving this conference said they left with, so I think our exit survey said 95% of people were leaving with more hope and feeling more equipped than when they came in.
That's amazing.
So this isn't just a chance for you to get together with a bunch of your girlfriends. It is that, but that's not all it's about. This is about the people that are ready to invest, dig in. And in fact, I was just talking to another girl this week who said, yeah, I love the coffee dates. I mean, I do want to go out with friends and have a great time. But at this point, this is about my family, saving my family and changing my family history. And if that is you, this is an incredible way to just get started on that journey. It is some of those first steps are absolutely scary. Some of the most unknown, scary, lonely ways you would think about is getting started on this journey. And we want to eliminate that for you and come around you as a community and really support you in those first steps.
And if you think about it, those that investment price is really kind of the cost of a couple sessions with a licensed counselor, and you're going to get way more than that at 2 days of conference. We've had lots of people say that. So speaking of the counselors and the resources that are going to be available, can we just go back for a minute to you? What's one of the resources that you use the most?
So resources that I use the most, I would have to say absolutely the tools I learned in those 3.5 years of therapy. I mean, I use those to fight well with my husband. Those just, you got to have, not just to get the upper hand. So tools that I learned in therapy, But another really practical tool that anybody could have access to is this thing called an EMDR app. That second year of processing, I dealt with incredible anxiety. I was still homeschooling our 4 kids, still trying to be an engaged wife and mom, and I was dying on the inside. I mean, I had spiritual trauma that had me feeling like I was dropping into hell like every second
Wow.
of the day.
Wow.
Horrible, horrible anxiety. I'd go to bed and not be able to sleep. And one of the things that got me through that was an EMDR app, and it's like $5.
So just to
It's
talk about that, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes. And so basically, this is what I mean. So, a counselor is going to go through that in a future episode. What is EMDR? How does it work? Why should you use it? But for now, just this is my layman's, because I'm not a counselor. This is my layman's version of that.
Okay.
It makes both of the sides of your brain. So you have a logical side and an emotional side to your brain, and it makes them speak to one another. So when you are in a heightened state of panic, you are dealing with life out of a heightened emotional state. You're not thinking things through clearly. And so this is safe to use with your kids. My son has used this. It helps with stuck thoughts when your brain is just role playing the same scenario over and over. Did I say that? Did I say what I meant? Did I lie? And you can't get out of it.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people that can use something like that right now. There's a lot of anxiety going on, a lot of
Yeah.
uncertainty, and more than that, just a loss of control in the world right now. So a practical tool that they can get their hands on and get remotely through their phone is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can just go to, I mean, it's available for Android or iPhone. And you just look up EMDR Anxiety Relief App, and it's a little blue icon. It is simple to use. Here's the other thing. Like, I just suggest you go straight to level 3. There's several levels there. The first couple are like an Australian man talking. And one of my issues as I was going through this was like, I'm always going to be abducted by this Astro van pulling up outside my house and just like taking me away to Thailand.
That's very specific. Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So anyway, so I'm like sitting there one day using this app, and I forgot that I was on the wrong level. And all of a sudden this Australian man speaks into my ear and says, "What are you thinking?" And I was like, I'm freaking out. That's what. So go straight. If you have an issue with Australian accents, then go to level 3. And it's just the dinging sound from one ear to another. And it just makes your brain focus on left and right. And it just gets everything back online. Easy to use, just easy to use.
So to make sure, because I don't want there to be a misunderstanding that this is some sort of humanistic, ancient ritual where we're going to try to disconnect from our bodies or something
Right.
like that. This is actually not about disconnecting. It's about focusing. So focusing our minds and taking ourselves, if you haven't gotten onto the community page yet, I highly recommend that you go over to GraceStory Ministries on Facebook and then get into the GraceStory community page. You have to subscribe on the website to gain access to that, because it's exclusive to our GraceStory subscribers. But in that community, Ryan Waters, he's a part of our team, and he does a great job of breaking down anxiety and then that fight or flight that kicks in naturally, and then some of the things that we can do to help overcome that. And then coming up on that as well is LaShonda Suggs, who's going to talk about grounding theory and how to focus. And it all connects. It's amazing how you start talking about all these things, and they all connect so that you can live a life that you were meant to live through Christ, a life more abundant. I know we're almost nearing the end of our time here. We're both Davisons, so we could talk all day. But I do want to ask you one more question here towards the end. So what is the one thing that people don't realize about GraceStory?
I think that that is a really great question. And we touched on it briefly when we talked about the men's conference that's coming up here. But I'm just really excited about what God is doing and the different ways that this is targeting the whole family, providing resources for the whole family. A lot of times, because we started with a women's conference, we get pegged as a women's conference. And yet GraceStory Ministries is actually just like we push holistic healing and promote that, we are a holistic conference. We don't believe that families can heal one-sided. Not that it's not possible. I don't want to discourage anyone, but when we can provide resources for the women and the men to come together and just really find the wholeness God has for families. In this age where family is being attacked, there are so many ways that our families are being attacked, that our marriages are being attacked, that us as individuals are being attacked. And so we want to make sure that we come alongside you, support you, equip you with the resources you need to really fight back well and find, like Nate has said, the wholeness and healing and abundant life in Christ that he has for you. Nate, I literally went a few years ago before GraceStory and before my processing. I was at a place where I would go to funerals and I was jealous. They were done. They didn't have to worry about their kids anymore. Some days, as a young mom, and I was thinking they don't even have to make supper anymore. But like deeper than that, they didn't have to worry about how they were going to die and the pain of this world and if things were going to be okay. If they were okay, they were done. And to do those 3.5 years, and the timeline is different for everybody. That 3.5 is not a concrete number for anyone. Some people do it quicker. Some people take a little bit longer, and that's fine. It's not about the timeline. But it's about getting in there and doing the work and coming out on the other side knowing, wow, I don't have to wonder anymore if God sees me. I know God sees me.
Yeah, talking about this journey, it's not something even after you get through a certain I don't know if the term is level or a certain portion of your therapy, your journey. I mean, if you think about it, this whole ministry, it's led by a group of administrators who just haven't arrived. I mean, we're with you on this. We are GraceStory. We're a part of this, a part of the GraceStory community. And honestly, Amber, I'm getting as much out of this ministry as anybody, because we have to know the content. And we're hearing people's stories, and we're doing the work ourselves. So it's really exciting. Well, I think that's just about all the time we have. We're going to have Amber back on the podcast for our next episode. She's going to be talking about some of her journey there and what that entailed. But I encourage you, if you haven't already, check the show notes on this. Go to her Instagram account, My Grace Story. That's going to be her personal account with, so are some resources on there, but there's more about her family, her story. Go to GraceStory Ministries on Instagram. That's our information page there. You'll get updates on conference, and it really comes alive around conference with updates on information. Mm-hmm. And then if you haven't already, go to GraceStory Podcast on Instagram and check out our resources and the episode and guest. That's really starting to take off there. Well, Amber, I am so glad that we had you on the show today. I'm excited about our next episode coming up in a couple weeks. We'll have these coming out every 2 weeks until conference out in November. And guys, if you haven't gone to GraceStoryMinistries.com and subscribed, make sure you do it. Amber, thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right, guys.
What an honor.
We'll see you next time.